Can there be an earthquake that goes 2,000 miles? Stay tuned and find out. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. All right. Turn window capture. There we are. Hey, everybody. How are you? I'm Joe Slick, your host, and tonight we're going to talk about a mega shear. Mega shear earthquakes have kind of been around a little bit. The discussion has been. We've talked about it several times. What is a mega shear? And how does it relate to the world? Well, mainly what's important to me is California, Oregon, Washington, and Canada, and Mexico for that matter. But often we've seen megaquakes happen 9.2, 9.5, 9.1s. 9s, okay, 8.8 that just happened here in Kamchatka. So are these mega shear or super shear earthquakes? Gotta wonder. How do we define what that is? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to look into a series of earthquakes in time, and then try to explain in detail what that means and the evidence for something that's happened. And then we'll close out with a something that here at JSL we're always got in the back of our mind to kind of prove a point. Is this real? Is this really going to happen? Is California going to break off and fall into the water? Or is the water going to overtake California? Is San Francisco really going to roll over and sink? Is the Cascade Range going to put a 9 and everybody get wiped out and Seattle will be no more? Or is it going to be in Mexico? And then, California is underwater. Well, under the ocean. Weird. So many different things have been said over the years, and there's a lot of people out there trying to create money, trying to make money on it, and we're not doing that here. I'd love to make money, but we just don't. It's not my focus. I love for you guys to subscribe and tip. You can leave a gratuity at Stream Elements and it's /Joe Slick Live /TIP and or exclamation point TIP. Or you can subscribe here at JSL over in twitch.tv /Joe Slick Live. We run a show Monday through Friday at generally about 7 a.m. to about 10 a.m. Arizona time, and figure that out if you don't know where that is. And then we do rabbit holes like tonight. This is pushed off one day, but Wednesday you had the Blue Jays were playing, and my cohort, who is going to be on with me just a minute, is he's a big fan for the Blue Jays, and he wanted to watch the game. I said, that's not a big deal. We'll just play off one more night. Not a big deal. Generally speaking, rabbit holes on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Arizona time. Figure it out. All right, without further ado, there's my buddy Canuck. Good evening, bud. How are you? Yeah. Oh, let me put your little volume up there a little bit. Say hello again.
Hello, everybody.
There, yeah, you're good now. All right, so I don't know how much you were able to hear my my intro, but I talked a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight, and we're going to get right into it, starting with about 1600, I think is what our agreement was. We're going to look at some quakes in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, that is, at 1600 when America was discovered, right? Was it 1492? We're not going to go that far, but 1600. And is there something that you'd like to say before we start looking at the dates, and then because I told them go ahead.
Yeah, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at the 1600s, all the stuff that was happening in the 1600s before Cascadia went off in 1700, because it's going to relate to stuff we were talk about later as well.
Right.
So what we're going to do first is just look at all the crazy things that were happening in the 1600s, which most people don't.
Yeah, most people don't know, huh? And then how that relates to super shear and these mega quakes that have been going on. We're only going to deal with mega quakes or super large earthquakes from the 1600s. Little ones that they just didn't write them. Hey, there was a quake, whatever. But these ones are significant quakes.
Yeah, so the ones in 1600s that we're going to talk about are ones that were big enough that they were noticeable, and people were there to write down dates and information.
Right.
So we know exactly when they were. So there's different information that backs up that that's the date that it was on. So anything that's on this GEA list, what's actually called is the Global Historical Earthquake Archive, and they have stuff in it going all the way back to the year 1000. But
right.
The closer you get to our time now, they have more corroborating evidence for the stuff. So
well, it makes sense, right? They have more seismic. I mean, when was the seismic thing on the 1800s thereabouts? That started to get everywhere.
China had a rudimentary seismometer before that, going back.
Right.
But our modern seismic instruments basically started in the 1800s. So we're going back like 200 years before that, just talking about these quakes that were happening in the 1600s, to show that all these there was a bunch of stuff happening before Cascadia happened in 1700. That's what we're going to show first tonight, and lead into all the other things and explain mega shear and super shear and all that stuff when we get down farther, because this stuff apparently has been happening forever. It's just we're understanding and giving it a name now. So that's what we're
right. Yeah, so let me put us in a little spot here, and So we have it a little formatted here for y'all, so you can see us and how we're responding to it, and then the actual file that we're reading from, the GIA. That's how we're gonna. That's how we're gonna talk to you about it.
The Global Historical Earthquake Archive, we call it GIA for short.
Right.
Basically, it's any ones that are in there are big enough that they were noticeable by and recorded by a bunch of people. So, in general, it has to be like a 7 for it to show up in this GIA list.
Right. And we're going to show you on this list where these earthquakes are happening, so that you're not going to be able to see it, but they are going to be able to.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Peru because Peru's like the start of us.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
16.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah. All right. So, starting with Peru here. All right. I'm gonna make sure I can see it here. What does it look like there? Okay, looks okay. All right, 1600 Peru. This was in the armpit of South America, as you see. This 1600, it happened in February 19th, was a 7.9 and about 20 kilometers in depth. We're going to kind of run through these and then just kind of sit back and kind of take an overall picture of where they're happening and the size of these earthquakes. And then the next 2 weeks later, another one in that same area came out to be a 7.9. And then Peru, 4 years later, happened closer to the beach, an 8.4 to 8.5. One channel has it as a 8.7 or a 9.4. So this was a massive quake in the armpit of South America here. And I'm only doing the western side. So Peru again, 1606. 2 years later, much further north, happened as a 6.5. And then Peru again on 606. Another one, which is right in the center near Lima, Peru, a 6.8. And then we have the next year, Antigua out in Barbuda at 1607. That one was at near 7. And then, I don't know where Tiliquanan is. Okay. Nicaragua on the Caribbean plate as well, the other edge, 7.2. Then Peru came back in 1609, right next to Lima again, with a 7.4 to 8.6, 55 depth. Then 1610, Venezuela popped with a 7.6. Okay. And
near Caracas?
Yeah, that's right on those mountains that just quaked, Merida and San Cristobal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just east of Barquisimeto. Okay, those mountains that lead into Caracas.
Yeah.
Which
so like where
yeah,
we just had
a quake in that region. Yes. Then Oaxaca, Mexico, inland Oaxaca, popped with a 7.5 in 1611. And Japan, okay, Dominican Republic, 1615, right on the shore, and that was a 7.5. So right on the shores of that. And then back to Chile in 1615, right in the armpit. So back to the armpit, 8.8. 7.5 to 8.8. Then the next year, 16, back up to Bogota, Colombia, 7-0. And then 1619 back to Peru. I don't know where this one is. Let me see where it is. Okay, it's up north of Lima. And this one is an 8.7, a 7.8 to 8.7. Pretty massive quake happened on that too. Damn flies. Maybe I got it that time. Been trying to kill the same fly for 3 days. I don't know where this. Then the Panama, and 1621 in Panama was a 6.9. So then, and that's Indonesia, Peru. The next one, Peru again, and this one is right by Lima, Peru, 7.5, and we're at now at 1630. Then 1631, Antigua, again out there by where we just had Barbuda, right? A 7 that happened out there in Antigua. So Peru and Antigua kind of back and forth. You see how that's working? Then I think Ghana isn't Ghana, and that's on the other side. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Ghana's Africa, I think.
Yeah, I know there's like another one in South America. I don't know where the hell that is. There's Romania.
1638 is the New Hampshire quake.
In 1638, yeah, New Hampshire, and that was a 6.5 to a 5.5.
Yeah,
it's uncertain about that, and we talked about that quake quite often.
Yeah, the newest studies on it say 6.5.
6.5. There you go. And that's 1638. So 1644, Colombia pops off again. It's the third big quake in Colombia. 7. That's a near 7. And then we have, what's this? Colombia again. 1644. 7 to 6. 6 to 7, somewhere in there. And then, well, here's another one. Chimborazo. Where the hell is this one? Oh, that's in Ecuador.
Ecuador, yeah.
That's another 7. And that year is 1645. All right. We have another Peru, it's 1647. Remember, not a lot of people lived in other areas, and these are coming up. This is right by Lima, Peru. And this is another 7, depth of 40 kilometers. Then Chile, 1647, the same year, mid-year, right about the next day, actually, May 14th, Chile popped with an 8 to an 8.5. In May 14th of 1647. And these dates, we'll be going back to these dates through all of our discussions, because a lot of dates hit and then we fill in the blanks later on, and then we go, wait, wasn't there an earthquake here? Wasn't there a volcano eruption there? Wasn't there some sort of event happen there? And then now we start to see these different links touching each other. And it's like, is it me, or is there some sort of pattern that starts to persist? And whether it's a 2-year period like most of the time we do it, or whether this 100-year period that explains what's preceding the 1700 megaquake in the Cascades that they believe was a 9. So all of this pressure down south in the Caribbean plate, the Nazca plate, the Cocos plate, the South American plate, the North American plate in Mexico, because a good portion of Mexico is in the North American plate. So all of these issues and seeing how they build up over time. And then there's this strange connection to the Middle America. I'm talking about the United States. So we'll be watching. Nicaragua, 1648. That's it. Yeah, Nicaragua right here. That was a 7.2. San Salvador, 1650. Shortly thereafter was an 8. What? A possible 8 in San Salvador. And then 1650, Peru, early in Peru. They didn't have a real date on San Salvador. They just knew it was 1650. Peru is March 31. And that is the interior side of Lima. And that's a 7.4. And then that same year, 3 days later, another Peruvian quake happened right there in that same area. And this again, it's a 7.2. So, and then we go down the next year to Nicaragua, 1651. And some of these are getting so full, I've got to remove them.
Blocking it.
Yeah, blocking. I can't see it. 7.3, and that's in a kind of a really bad area because there's a volcano in that water, right there. So, not good. I think El Pongo might be there. And then in 1651 we have Antigua again. Interesting how there's a Peruvian in Antigua and Peruvian Barbuda back and forth. Interesting. This one is a 5.9 to maybe a 6. Okay. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Then Oaxaca, Mexico in 1653. And they don't even have they just know it erupted or it had an earthquake. So there's no size on that. Peruvian, 1655. 7.7 to an 8.8. Massive quake off of Lima. So pretty damn big quake in Peru there. Then Chile, 1657, 2 years later. Central Chile, Concepcion, had an 8. So you can see how it moved down, right? Just 2 years for the, these plates, they're only moving 2 or 3 inches a year. But when you get a massive quake like that, they're moving sometimes 2 meters, like Kamchatka moved 2 meters, to 4 meters, like Ridgecrest. Pretty damn crazy. And then I think Landers was 4 or 5 meters. So pretty massive quakes, moving a lot. And then for a while, everything kind of catches up. Takes time. And then we were in Chile there, so. And that was 1657. Peru in 1658, just north of Lima again, pops with a 7.7 to 8.8. Crazy. And then El Salvador, 1658, did I already talk about that? No, El Salvador is one. 7.5.
So it's like Central America, Peru are going.
Central America, Peru, Antigua, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In Nicaragua, 1663 was a 7.3. And then we have Peru, 1664, 7.5 to 7.3. Pretty crazy. And then, don't tell me, 1666. The Dominican Republic. 1650, 5.5, 7 to 7.5, 7.5, and then Antigua goes off again. Pretty crazy. 1666. They're guessing somewhere around a 7. Pretty interesting how Peru is popping, and then Antigua pops, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to close some of these.
In the 1600s.
Yeah, all in the 1600s, everybody. Salvador, 1671. Central America again. Pops at a 7.8, 7.5 to an 8. And then, I don't know where the hell that one is. Okay, never mind. The DR pops again. See, back on the other side of the Caribbean plate. 7.5, 7.3 to 7.5. There's one article that says maybe a 6.2. Right there next to Santo Domingo. And then Venezuela down in 1674. Is that Venezuela? So that's up there in the mountains again. Crazy. By Caracas, 7.4. So we can see what's happening. Peru, Antigua, Mexico, or Central America. Peru, Antigua, Central America, Mexico. Peru, Antigua, Venezuela. And then back to Venezuela after the other three have been popping. So we can see a semi-pattern kind of working. It's a rotation, so to speak.
Yeah, and the next one in 1674 is Bolivar, Ecuador. So now
Ecuador. Oh, yeah, there's Ecuador. 6.45 to a 7. Now, what would be very, very interesting is if they had not, I don't even know if they have knowledge of the Galapagos Islands yet in 1679. But I would wonder if there was volcanic activity, because generally speaking, when Ecuador kind of goes off, the volcanoes were going off in the islands over there in Galapagos. The eruptions will happen and then they'll stop, and then big quakes happen over in Ecuador. I've seen that happen very recently in some of the studies that I've looked at. So I'm wondering about that. So and that is what do you call that? Bolivar. Antigua again. Oh my God, Antigua again. Oh, that's Guatemala. Okay, another Antigua in Guatemala.
Yeah, Antigua's the town, the little town in Guatemala. It's not far from Guatemala City now.
Oh yeah, I see.
Well, the little town or whatever was the capital before they moved it to Guatemala.
Oh
Guatemala
yeah, it's Zapa.
One of our other.
Yeah. I think it got wiped out by this earthquake. Yeah. So Ixapa or Antigua got wiped out. It's a 6 to a 7. They don't know. Cuba.
So that moved it Guatemala City.
Right. That's when it became more big. Yeah, just offshore Cuba, 1678, February 11th, was a 6.7 to a 7. And that area just hit not too long ago, and right after that, we had some sort of earthquake southwest of the Cayman Islands, and it was a 7.6. And we haven't seen anything really go out of that, where the movement pushed everything. So it could be locked up. It could be, because it's only been a short period of time, the Cuban quake where that just happened. Peru, 1678, off Lima again, 7.7. And then Comalapa, that's over there. Guatemala again, right where and that other little town is that just got destroyed a few years before. That's another near 7. So 2 big quakes in that area, 1676 and then 1679. I think they said, we don't need to live here no more. We'll just move over here. And then Chile, 1681, right there in the armpit of South America, 7.3 to 7.2. And then we go back to Antigua, 1681. Barbuda, Antigua, maybe a 7. And then, I don't know where the hell this one is. That's Romania. Oaxaca, Mexico, 1682. Inland was a 6, thereabouts. Why is that on there? It's because it's significant. Probably a lot of damage happened in Oaxaca. And get this, we go back to Antigua, 1683. What is it about Antigua? They don't even know how strong this was. It happened in May of 1683. Very large quake. And then the DR pops. 7.5, 7.3, possible 6.5. So pretty crazy on how the eastern side of the Caribbean plate, depending on where you're located. For me, it'd be the eastern side because I'm on the far left, but to Canuck, it'd be on the western side, right? I don't know. Would be? I don't know. It would be on the.
Yeah, it's pretty much lined up with me. So
Yeah.
The same time. Because Brazil is the same time zone as
Oh,
me.
is it? Far out, man. It just.
Yeah, so when I talked to
mind-bending.
the Brazilians, they were always on my time or an hour difference because they didn't have daylight savings time. So we were always having our meals at the same time when I was talking to people in Brazil
Right.
because they all line up. Because Brazil time and Atlantic Standard Time, which I'm on the Atlantic coast, are the same.
All right. So back out there to Las Casas or Casas, a 7, quite possibly a 7 in Chiapas, Mexico. And then Chile popped 1687 in the central Chile, Santiago, 1687, 7.3. Don't tell me that's Antigua again. 1687, another Antigua?
Yeah, it's a popular place.
Jeez.
Hundreds.
Yeah, September 10th of 1687, a large earthquake happened. Then back to Peru, 1687. And that one's an 8.6, 8.4 to 8.6.
Yeah, we're getting closer to the magic 1700s.
Yeah, I know, we were getting close. And then Mexico, Veracruz, Mexico, 1688, possible 6 that happened there. Then we moved to 1689, Guatemala, 6.0. Then Antigua again. What the hell? 1689. A large earthquake, let's just say. I don't think it was an 8, but it's just, what the heck, you know? Then the Lesser Antilles, right next to it, 1690. 7.5 to an 8.
Yeah, and 1690 is also the same year they say that the southern San Andreas at Salton Sea went off, according to the fault studies. Now that's according to the fault studies, so it's not in this list because there wasn't anybody there at that time except the
indigenous Mexicans, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't write down the earthquake date for us.
Right.
So we had to figure that out from other means later by trenching in the faults. So in 1690, we had
Southern California popping.
Yeah, at the same time as.
And that's our first real knowledge of large earthquakes happening in the Salton Sea, as well as the area of volcanic activity, which we read about over the next couple hundred years, all the way into the 1800s.
Yeah, because that was like 1890s, I think.
Yeah, where there's some volcanic activity over there. And indigenous people believe that the floods would come in, the sea would come in, overrun the volcano, and then it would erupt. And so, or the heavy rains would happen, and it would seep down, and then the mud pits would erupt into large volcanic activity, and thus earthquakes.
Yeah, because if you read about what was there before Salton Sea, because Salton Sea has only existed since 1905. Before that, there was a gigantic lake there that they have named Lake Kauai. So you have to look at the history of the gigantic lake that filled the Salton Trough before, because they said it was so big at one time that it went all the way from, I think, where Palm Springs are.
Right.
All the way.
The entire Coachella Valley was sunk with water.
All the way down to where Cerro Prieto is. It was all covered with water with a gigantic lake they call Lake Kauai. And you can read all sorts of studies on that I don't want to get into now. They figured out like how much water it had in it at various times.
I'll show you the map here. So here is the area of where the delta is. So he's talking about Laguna Salada, all the way into the Salton Sea, all the way up into the Coachella Valley, Mecca, Coachella into Indio. All this was flooded at one time. And when these kinds of things would flood, the volcano that's located right here is the Red Island volcano. On this map, they call it Red Island volcano. That's kind of a shield volcano that they use, push water down, and then they create electricity with steam. And the steam turns turbines, and turbines make electricity. So that's kind of like what's happening up in Northern Cal, also down in Mexicali. So those areas. So when this area floods, there's been some volcanic activity.
And you have to remember back then we weren't diverting any rivers.
Correct.
For
the Colorado River, you can take a trip from the Colorado River up to Vegas and further, from what I read. So
we were
can't
just
do that anymore.
Wherever it goes.
Right.
Yeah. So the indigenous people weren't building gigantic dams and diverting all the water.
Right.
What we should be doing now.
You can get into the Colorado or the Grand Canyon going up that river, if other than the rapids and stuff, Yeah. All right, and that's Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, 1689 pops, and that is a 6.0. Antigua again, 1689. That's the one. I think we already read those.
Yeah.
Lesser Antilles, and then Peru. Then the DR pop, 1691. Dominican Republic. It's a 6.7 to a 7.5.
Antigua's like the most popular. It's earthquake.
I don't know what's going on. 1691 Antigua. A near 7. Oh my God.
All the quakes.
Jamaica. All right, here's Jamaica, Kingston. A 7.5 to a 7.7 happened in Jamaica. Probably somewhere on that main fault that works through there. So then Argentina pops at a 1692. That's on the backside of Iquique. And let me see what that is. 7.0. Then San Miguel. San Miguel is in Honduras, and that's 1693. Large earthquake happened. They don't have a size. Peru, 1696. Lima, Peru, 6.7. Let me clear those out. Then Oaxaca, Mexico. Oaxaca, Veracruz, so it's up in the mountains. I don't know. A very strong earthquake. It could be 8 to a 9, somewhere in there. Guerrero, the coast of Guerrero, 1697, 7.5. And then Mexico again, 1697, right in that same area, 7.5. So 2 7.5s in 1697 right there. 1698 or 1697 again, Peru. Lima, Peru, 7.3, just offshore. Then Ambato, I don't know, Ecuador. So now we're already to Ecuador. 1698, Central Ecuador, comes in at a 7.3 to a 7.7. Okay, that's not where we are. Peru, 1699, just north of Lima, Peru, was a 7.8. Jeez.
Yeah. Go see how it's leading into Cascadia, because that's our next one.
Yep. The next earthquake on record is Cascadia. It's up in. They're assuming it's up in the middle, up off of Victoria. That's a 9, 8.95 to a 9.
Yeah, you can say it started at the top and went down.
Right.
The full rip. That's what they say. But there's disagreements.
There's disagreements on if it was one quake or multiple quakes, but it was in a short period of time that these quakes were happening. The evidence they have is sunken land where the water came in and drowned forest, where the turbidites and the sand came in during tsunamis. And then we've shown evidence of this event happening multiple times. I think in the 1500s, did we say that? Did we say that when Cascadia went in the 1500s?
Yeah. Yeah, a bunch of times, which
yeah.
we're not going to
right. We're just saying this is a reoccurring event, the Cascade Range, just like Peru, just like Antigua, just like Mexico, just like Chile, just like Nicaragua.
See the recurring pattern. Something big always happens in South America and in the Caribbean before you get the bigger ones coming up through.
Yeah.
So Central America, Mexico, and then West Coast of North America. It's just how it works. And to explain that, it probably makes sense because if the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is moving everything, we don't have records of quakes out there. We only have it since 1900. But if it's moving the plate west, that's how this would work, right? South America, Central America, and then North America would all adjust one after the other based upon what the Atlantic Ridge.
And isn't there some earthquakes across United States in the early or late 1600s?
Yeah, it's not listed on this one, but there was a notable quake in the Memphis area, but it wasn't Memphis then, it was just trees.
Mm-hmm.
On December 25th, 1699, so exactly 1 month before Cascadia, there was an earthquake that knocked missionaries off their feet that were going through that area, the Memphis area, which it would be today, to go and visit the indigenous peoples. And they got knocked off their feet from the quake.
They had sand water spouts coming out of the sand and stuff too.
Yeah, so they've since dated the sand boils there and figured out that New Madrid went off in 1699, probably a 7.
Just like in 1810, 11.
Yeah, 1811 and 12. So they found sand boils that had, because the sand boils tend to come up, I guess, in the same spots.
Right.
So they found when they sampled where the sand boils got due to those big quakes, they found that it did it in 1699, but what they dated to. So there was actually people going through there that felt it and wrote down the date, but they later went back and figured out by trenching and all these other things they did, because they can date the sand boils with the sand where the sand
I
showed
have
up.
thunder and lightning here right now.
Uh-oh.
That's okay. That's all right. We're good. I saw the lightning and then I heard the thunder right now.
But what's interesting is that New Madrid actually went off 1 month before Cascadia in 1700. And that's what we want to get into tonight, because we were showing all these big quakes that were happening like 100 years building up.
That lead up to the 1700 Cascade earthquake. Yeah. In 1701, Haiti had a big giant earthquake as well, and that's a 7.7. So it just never stops, man.
So it's just like alternating back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And it's all the edges of like American plate, if you want to simplify.
Right. So I guess what I was trying to do, and what I wanted to do with all of you, is to give you the dates that you can see what happens with, the connection with Antigua and Chile, Antigua and Ecuador, Antigua and Guatemala, Antigua and Mexico, Antigua and Venezuela, Antigua and the DR, Antigua and Peru, Antigua and Chile, and all of these over the 100 years that we just covered. There's and then we talked a little bit about what was happening in North America, or with eyewitnesses where they couldn't walk, and then in 1638 that happened, in the United States.
Yeah, the 1638 New Hampshire quake. At first, they didn't know where it was, but they felt it all over the East Coast.
Right.
So it was the first big quake that the Pilgrims felt. So they actually recorded it, but it was recorded all over because they felt it in Montreal and
right.
Massachusetts.
It was 6.5 to a 5.5. It's uncertain. Right now, the epicenter they have offshore Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
The new study has it inland on the inland faults by the foothills of the Appalachians. It's the same one that if you follow it up.
Right.
Because I'm foothill of the Appalachians. So it's all the faults that raise the Appalachian Mountains. You can follow all the way. Where I am in Brunswick, all the way. Right
which
down,
are a very ancient orogeny that has since eroded away over millions of years, and during the ice age and all that, ice ages, which happen about every 1.5 to 2.5 million years. So those cycles erode orogenies or mountains that existed prior to. There's another thunder that eroded it.
What it is, it's a gigantic thrust fault that goes all the way from Iceland all the way to Alabama.
Yeah, the mid-Atlantic or the Atlantic ridge has pushed apart North America and Europe, North America and Africa, and when it did that, it created these mountain ranges, and over these thousands or millions of years, those mountains have since eroded, and that's why we have, I think they're like 5,000 to 7,000 feet up, the orogenies now along the East Coast, but they're not very high. Much different happening on the Sierra Nevadas and the Rocky Mountains, where the North American plate has crunched up against the Pacific plate, and a whole different type of orogeny that happened there. So
and we never talked about it either. There was a big quake that affected Montreal on the East Coast in 1663, which was actually in the Charlevoix seismic zone, and it knocked all the French people around in Montreal in 1663.
So all these large quakes that we're talking about, they affect the areas around them, and they create other quakes, or they're associated with other quakes. I always try to tell people here on JSL, it's Just Like Live, don't get caught up thinking microwave thinking, put the food in there, nuke it, you got it in 2 minutes. You got to think along a little more geologic time. And that's why we did this 100 years. Now, this 100 years is a very small time frame for things to happen. And you just heard massive quakes in 100 years. Massive. We only covered 100 years. We didn't cover more than that. Can you imagine how much the earth has moved in those areas in 100 years? You heard several major quakes happening in the Caribbean. You heard several major quakes happen in Peru, Chile, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico. And then we closed out with the Cascade, major quake in 9. If we went into we're in the 1700s. If we went through the 1700s into the 1800s, you would find out there were a couple more 9s that happened. And in those time periods. So leading up, and that's kind of what we're kind of trying to show you.
So we're trying to show that, like, Cascadia didn't just happen out of nowheres, because stuff was happening all over the North American plate.
The North American plate was getting pushed really hard.
Yeah. So there was a lead up to it that people at that time weren't paying attention to, because they were only concerned about the quake that was in their area. So they weren't looking back and seeing that all these other things were happening in South America and North America at the same time, in Central America, because that's how it works.
Right.
And you'll see, so even though we've just figured that out now, because we have all this data and all this technology that we can put together and figure out how it works, it was still working the same way back then as what it is now. It's just now we have more stuff monitoring it, and we're paying closer attention. That's the only difference.
Right.
But you should still see the same pattern down through time, because if this is how it's working, that's how it works. Like, that's just how it is.
That's how it is. And
the more data we have, we should see this should prove.
So there are people out there, Canuck, and you've seen it, where they'll start to say the Cascades are going to go off. The Cascades are going to go off. The Cascades are going to go off. And I got the proof. And the Cascades didn't go off. Yeah.
Well, based upon the historical stuff that I've studied so far, you're going to have all sorts of other issues before.
What leads up to those events? And then we have this thing called super shear. It's a newer thought process in geologic circles, where a break or an earthquake happens, and I think it's the P wave that travels faster than the speed of sound through the rock, and as it does, it triggers other faults along a path and creates thus larger and longer quakes. And the evidence that's coming out where one quake can spawn another quake, or push it enough to make it go over the edge where it was already set to go. And whether it's a sidestep or a kind of like what was happening, and this is the first time that scientists had to swallow their pride and say, okay, in 1992 we had a quake in California, that in Joshua Tree, pretty significant quake, that a couple months later kicked off landers which then kicked off Big Bear. And they're like going, all these quakes were related. And that's because the movement, the massive movement, they showed from the space shuttle how much the entire desert, the desert that I live in on the other side. No, I used to live on the other side. The Mojave Desert moved 17 feet, which they can see from space. The entire block of the Mojave shifted 17 feet. And that's, hey, that's a lot. Then that pressure moved. And then in 1999, we had another 7.1 adjacent to it. That's 10 years later, right?
Yep.
1992 to 1999, yeah, 7 years. Another major quake. And then in that area, we had Mexico go off in that time frame. In Baja in 2010, and then Ridgecrest in 2019. 4 sevens within, I'd say, 200 miles, maybe 300 miles. 4 sevens. That's a lot. So if a 7 can push on average 15 feet, we got a 7.1, we got a 7.3, we got another 7. We're talking 25 feet, the entire California shear zone in 40 years. Think about, we just did 100 years. And all these land masses moving, all these plates moving, Antigua, Chile, and these were more massive quakes. Whether they're subduction or whether they're strike slip or the compressional or whether they're thrust faults, the earth is moving. Now we need to fill in the pieces from 1700, just a little prior, to see and show you what was happening in the United States. And there is some data that we can bring to you. But I think, do you want to put that on the next one, or you want to kind of jump to
I just want to do the article.
You want to do the article now, or do you want to do it the next time around?
No, I want to do the article right now.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
It's about how Cascadia and northern San Andreas are connected.
Yeah. So, you know what happened? There's evidence that show that prior to Cascadia, something else happened in California, in Northern California. So there's a new article out right now that's talking about this, and I'll turn it over to you, Canuck, and I'll leave this image of what we're talking about. Actually, what I'll do is I'll put on the faults here in California. Now, the last 2 rabbit holes we did San Francisco area. We talked about the Macama Fault, the Bartlett Springs Fault in the north, and in a central part of where San Francisco is, we talked about the Hayward Fault and the Calaveras Fault. Okay, this time we're going to talk further north on the northern edge of the San Andreas.
So if you watched our previous episodes on those, because we talked about the dates of the different times that Hayward and Macama and all them went off, you're going to see that it's tying in with all this other stuff. So I'll say that right now. Like in this article I'm going to talk about next. And this is all in the news right now. Everybody's all going crazy with it. So I'm going to tie in all this latest news article here and study with what we just talked about, going over all the stuff from 1600 to 1700, because it's going to start making, you're going to see all the numbers going together. Oh,
Myanmar. It's an aftershock. Yeah. This is the Cascadia subduction zone right here. This is the San Andreas down here. The triple junction of the Mendocino was right here. Okay, so everybody's clear on what we're at. We're talking about Northern California, Southern Oregon, and I don't have any more faults in there yet. We're still looking for them. But go ahead, bud.
Okay, so this article from the LA Times, just from 2 days ago. The title of it is West Coast Two Monster Faults Could Trigger Back-to-Back Earthquakes, new research suggests. New research suggests the San Andreas Fault in the Cascadia subduction zone could produce devastating back-to-back earthquake disasters. Scientists found evidence that major Cascadia quakes were followed by large San Andreas earthquakes in 1700 and throughout the last 2,500 years. So it's done this more than one time. There are two of the West Coast's most destructive generators of huge earthquakes, the San Andreas Fault in California and the Cascadia subduction zone offshore of California's north coast, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. The public has often thought of these danger zones as separate entities. But what if they were capable of back to back disasters? That's the unsettling possibility described in a groundbreaking new study published recently in the journal Geosphere. The authors suggest that for thousands of years, large earthquakes on the Cascadia subduction zone were quickly followed by large earthquakes on the northern San Andreas Fault. In 1700, a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is believed to have measured around a magnitude 9. Based on archaeological evidence, villages sank and had to be abandoned, according to the USGS. That earthquake was so powerful, entire sections of the Pacific coastline dropped by as much as 5 feet. In the Pacific Northwest, Native American stories told of how the prairie became ocean and canoes were flung into trees. The study suggests that the Cascadia earthquake was followed by a northern San Andreas fault earthquake from Cape Mendocino toward San Francisco with a magnitude of around 7.9. So they're basically saying this happened right close in time period to when Cascadia happened. So just like at, just pretty close or just a little bit after.
Right. It is a supposition by them that one thing happened, then the other. And they believe Cascadia went prior to the northern part of the San Andreas, and they have a reasoning behind it. And what was the reasoning there, Canuck?
No, it's going to explain it here.
Oh, you're going to read it? Okay.
Yeah, they're going to say what that suggests is that the San Andreas earthquake happened very closely in time after the Cascadia earthquake, said Jason R. Patton, because he's one of the main guys in the study, and Goldfinger, Chris Goldfinger is the other one. Engineering geologist with the California Geological Survey and a co-author of the study. The evidence suggests the San Andreas Fault in 1700 ruptured in an earthquake within hours to days of the Cascadia earthquake. It could have even been minutes, but we can't nail it down, said the study's lead author, Chris Goldfinger, a paleoseismologist with Oregon State University and a professor emeritus of marine geology. Now I'm going to have to explain this. Goldfinger is the one that does the turbidites to figure out.
And what is a turbidite?
Turbidite is a sample they take out of a submarine canyon off the coast, and
so it's a fluvial plain. It's a flow of material that comes out and spreads out, and they take samples, drill holes all the way in those to find out what's in there. And then they date the material.
They take a whole bunch of samples and they compare them all, and they can see like different levels of sediment in it.
Right. So basically, they'll see a layer of sediment that rolled out through this fluvial plain, and then they'll see another layer, and then another layer, and another layer, and another layer, and then they compare those with other layers that they've studied, and then they can date those things based upon what they found in there and the magnetic poles and the type of sediment, and they can trace the sediment on land and say, okay, well, this belonged to that mountain, or this belonged to that volcano, and they can say, okay, based upon the depth of these multi-layer flows in the fluvial plain, they can say this reoccurring event took place. And then they could say, well, in this particular article, they said they found light sediment, and then they found more coarse grained sediment. And that's how they kind of differentiate the two areas.
Is it was two bigger quakes close together.
Right. Two super large quakes. One was further away, and one was closer to the place where they did their drill hole. And then they said, wow, how does that happen? And then they create a model, and they decided one.
Yeah, because in this submarine canyon, whatever the name is, Noyo, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a canyon that would get both a big San Andreas quake in it. It would feel that, and also a big Cascadia one. So they could tell when they compared the different samples that all this stuff was all happening, like in the year 1700.
Right.
Time. So that's what they were doing to figure these time periods out. Now, this study they did was for 2,500 years, but they're focusing in mainly for this article on 1700.
Yeah, because it didn't catch them unaware, like, what? Wow.
Yeah, but they found out it did at other times.
Yeah, now that they understand what's going on, they're starting to see in other lake beds throughout California and Oregon and Washington, they can see where the shaking has gone so bad, where they can see in fluvial plains down in canyons, offshore and onshore. They compare them.
And onshore in where there's lakes.
Right.
So where you have a lake, they can do turbidites and that to find out see if the big inland quakes recorded in the lakes match up with the ones offshore.
Offshore, right. And it's this kind of technology that is super, super interesting. It's cutting edge. It's really defining. Go ahead.
It's kind of like how they do the tsunami deposits on land.
Sure.
Because you see the different layers of left behind by when the tsunami came in. So it's the same idea.
Right.
It's just doing this underwater with samples that are underwater, either offshore or inland in the lake.
And they're also comparing another studies that aren't just the turbidites, but they're looking at tree rings and the dating based on those tree rings, what has happened throughout in redwood trees throughout all of California. And they're saying, wow, this is correlating to this. Oh, wow, this is correlating to that. And then they start to get closer to a date. Then they're starting to see, hey, wait a minute. Do you mean that Cascadia went off, then California went off, or vice versa? It doesn't matter. Yeah. How big were these quakes?
And can also do on land trenches across faults to figure out when they went off.
Right.
So what they're doing, they're adding all this information together so that they can see when all these faults went off, and if they're all these different time periods that they figure out, is it following a pattern? Which is how they get the recurrence rate for faults and all this stuff, right? And big earthquakes. Everything else is what they're doing. So they're trying to take all this data and put it all together to figure out how it's working, basically, and how frequently all this stuff happens, and is it an isolated incident, or is there a bunch of other stuff that all happens at the same time? which I would say now is leaning the other way. The more stuff they do, they say, well, there's a bunch of other stuff happening too at the same time. So the
Right.
big megaquake didn't come alone. It had lots of
Yeah.
friends.
So far, there's kind of a. I'm sure the data is already there. We just haven't quite got it yet. Kind of two holes in our data right now that we're looking up. One is in Oregon and one is in Central and Southern California. We do have the Mexico stuff. We showed you that already. We've seen Central America already. We've seen South America already. So we showed you massive, massive earthquakes that have happened throughout the years. And the connections between these kind of bang, 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 back and forth. It's like, wait a minute. And yes, there are a series of earthquakes that happen in the center, the filling in the blanks. And the quake in Northern California on the San Andreas may have been a filling of the blank in the 1700. There may have been larger quakes in Southern California, and then the northern Cascades go off, and then the northern portion of the San Andreas erupted. Now, that data is still being compiled to talk about with Goldfinger about off the shore of Southern Cal. He's checking all the canyons all the way down to San Diego. I think he's somewhere in Los Angeles the last couple of years. I think.
Yeah, they were off
In a
Long Beach.
couple of seasons down there. And
Yeah.
there is no doubt in my mind that they're going to find some evidence of major quakes in Southern Cal and start to date these things. And they're going to start to equate with what's happening in Mexico, also the Cascades. Now, remember, there are other dates we have in Cascades. We have 1570, we have 1490 or something like that, 1438. We
They're
did a
all in the big list.
yeah,
But
we did a big study on those as well. So we've got a couple of dates. Also, what's quite interesting is there's a New Madrid connection to these.
yeah, and I want to read the next two paragraphs
Go
here
ahead.
because of what we just said. So, I'm going to summarize this again. The evidence suggests the San Andreas Fault in 1700 ruptured in an earthquake within hours of days of the Cascadia earthquake. It could have been minutes, but we can't nail it down. So that's what Goldfinger said. The hypothesized 1-2 punch of earthquakes was probably not just a black swan chance in a million, Goldfinger said. This is like most of the time. The only exception in the last 2,500 years was 1906. That was the only event in which a major quake on the northern San Andreas Fault wasn't preceded by a huge quake on the Cascadia subduction zone, according to the analysis of the available data. So this is what he's going to start throwing out other numbers here. A huge Cascadia earthquake followed by a northern San Andreas fault earthquake likely also happened sometime between 1425 and 1475. Well, in our previous studies, we were talking about Hayward and Maycomma Fault. They were going off in the same time period with sevens between 1424 and 1475. And he said also between 1175 and 1225, and around the years 8825 and as far back as 475 BC, according to Goldfinger. So if you've been paying attention to all our other things where we've been talking about the paleoseismological history of quakes on certain faults, like on the West Coast, you'll see that all these numbers are all starting to run together. So, what I want to do eventually is do a chart with all the faults listed all the way from like North Alaska down to Baja and have it columns by century. And I want to like put all these dates when all these faults went off so we can actually look and see what fault was going off all around the same time. So this is what I want us to lead to eventually, to show that like when these big mega quakes happen, there's all these other faults that are going off around the same time. It's not just the one
Well,
thing going off.
isn't that what we kind of do here on Rabbit Hole? We kind of are bringing people's attention to the fact that, hey, earthquakes don't happen in a vacuum. They don't just like, boop, there's an earthquake.
Out of nowhere.
But you get to learn the motion and what's going on, and that's something that the guy that you and I used to go to his channel and stuff, and nothing to say about the guy, but he couldn't articulate. We were trying to talk about it, but he was not able to articulate, and he didn't really want to teach anybody. He's doing his thing, and great for him. But we've gone into, over the last 5 years now, almost 6. It's 6 for me now. With JSL, we've gone in and really done some deep studies and look at some articles and compile some articles, compile some thoughts, and then watched a lot of teachings about how geology works. And then made our own conclusions as well. And now there's several other shows out there that are doing the same kind of thing, but have morphed out of what, where we started. And there's a lot of great channels out there. There are a lot of people that are, clickbait stuff, but there are some really good teaching out there. And one of those guys is Nick Zentner. And what's the other guy from Idaho? He's
Takeoff.
no, he's from Montana or Minnesota. I love Takeoff. I really do. I'd love just to sit in his class and learn so much from him and his way of thinking, because he studied so much. But Sean Woolsey.
Yeah, Wilson.
Sean Woolsey is another guy that's he's a teacher, and just like Nick Zentner, and they kind of teach the basics of geology and how to kind of present it. And I recommend, if you want to learn more about geology, go check those two guys out, because they're not going to talk like way over your head. If you're a newbie to this kind of stuff, they're not going to talk way over your head. If you spend time going through the Nick's A to Z's, we've seen them all. And he's just about to start an Alaska launch. I'm so excited, because I think what we're talking about, Cascade, doesn't end in Cascade. It's up there in Alaska too. And there's going to be evidence that shows that all along from Alaska all the way down to the tip of South America, or Chile, what we call affectionately, which is probably wrong, but this is what we call it affectionately, Walker Lane lineament, that goes all the way down the mountain buildings, coastal mountain building ranges, but because it's not necessarily a magnetic lineament.
If you talk to the expert on Walker Lane, who's at the University of Nevada at Reno.
Yeah, he's in Reno, yeah.
Yeah, he will say that it goes from Haida Gwaii to Gulf of California officially.
Yeah, officially that's where it goes, yeah.
But I think he's...
Yeah. Well, he can do what evidence is shown there, and how we kind of take the lineaments and go around the planet, because we have an electromagnetic connection with lineaments, and we think the lineaments actually are creating the faults, and the lineaments are actually driving the movement of the plates, and there's a reason behind that, but
the neotectonics people say once you find the limit, it just keeps going. Now we're trending, it goes around the world.
Goes around the world and through the center of the core and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to get into physics and electromagnetism to go, and that kind of takes away from what we're talking about. So, um, if you want to talk about that, you can send me a message in a Gmail account. I have a JSL discussion at Gmail. Send me something there, and then we can talk about it. But outside of that, you can.
What they're saying from this latest study is just that Cascadia goes off and then northern San Andreas responds. But if you look at what happened in the 1600s, we also had, based upon fault studies at Salton Sea, it went off in 1690. So that would have been 10 years before Cascadia.
Which I think Southern Cal went off before Northern Cal. Yeah. I think Central Cal went off before Northern Cal. And I think Cascadia isn't one quake, but it's multiple quakes that happen, just like the quakes that happened in the 1800s with Chile, ending up in Chile's 9.5. I can see that happening. A full rip happening all at once, I struggle with that. But, again, this is my opinion. I think it was a rip from the south all the way to the north. But they're saying it happened here and then happened here. And it did happen here prior, but they don't have that section right there in the middle, which Goldfinger's working on. So, again, that's my supposition.
1690, and if you look up the other fault studies for the southern San Andreas segments, they have that going back like 2,000 or 2,500 or whatever years, depending on which one you're looking at, which is why you need this table chart thing that I'm talking about to see when all these other parts were going off before, all these different faults. But it appears to me how it worked in the 1600s was it was southern San Andreas first, then Cascadia, then
northern
San Andreas. So that's how.
And there is an Alaskan component in the middle of all that, or around that, as bookends.
Oh, there could be. So. There could be, but the Russians, they were in Kodiak Island until 1788.
Yeah.
So we're missing a bunch of dates.
Right. But they'll find the dates because they're digging in there, and that's why I'm real excited about what Nick Zentner's doing here this spring or this winter. Sorry. Talking about this data that he does not have, but he's learning it as we are learning it.
They're doing the same thing with Tintina Fault now too.
Yeah. Tintina Fault is interior. Yeah, is pretty far interior of the 3 or 4 main faults that Alaska here, and then all of a sudden everything turns and goes south.
And they probably already done it on Denali too, but I just haven't looked it up yet to find out what years it.
Yeah. Well, I again that last guy who Nick released here this week. If you read through the tea leaves, so to speak, he has a lot of data. He's been studying it for a long time.
Because what I want to do is I want to primarily focus on the last 2,000 years and get them all.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
absolutely, yeah.
Show all the different faults, like all along the west coast, all the way coming down. Like you could add other ones in too, because you add New Madrid, you could add.
Right. For me, I'm good from that time period, 1,000 onward. I think it's probably attainable. And they go 2,500 years. Most of these big studies, and they just said, well, beyond that. You have to remember that we're coming out of an ice age 11,500 years ago. It started a little before then. It melted and then came back, and then now it melted all the way. Now there's talk about that we're going to enter another ice age. They said, everybody, oh, no, it's warming. Well, it hasn't warmed that much, son. But
have nuclear war.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. And a limited or a full that just would be devastating. And the Holocene, what do they call it? The Holocene die-off is happening already because of man killing all these bacteria and plants and animals over the last, 200,000 years or whatever. It is what it is. Canuck, I want to thank you for this evening. What we're going to talk about the next time, probably we're going to bring in Southern Cal. I think that's what we're going to bring in. The dates. Did we do that already? Did we fill in the missing pieces?
I don't think we did. 1690.
Right.
When we were doing the other ones, we did the most recent ones, probably the last 200 years.
And let me throw something really far out. I mean, really far out. There's a guy. He was
we basically went back as far on the west coast, Southern Cal, probably to 1811, 1812.
Yeah. We talked about 1850s. We talked about 1870s. Yeah. 1890s, 1915, 1917, and then, 1906, of course.
It's the earliest quake they know about
1952.
in California for sure was I think it was July 1769, because it was the Spanish explorers coming in from the coast, heading inland near LA, and they got knocked off their feet by a big quake.
Yeah, they got knocked off, right.
Yeah, which now they think it was probably Newport Inglewood.
And what's interesting about that as well is they have the same story talking to the indigenous people as did the Spaniards talking to the indigenous people and the American people, coming east in Fort Yuma about the little events that were happening, in a Salton Sea. So
like
you got Salton Sea here, and you got LA up here, and similar events happening here and similar events happening here, all in Southern California, and over a couple hundred years, and I think that's pretty darn interesting. I think it's pretty darn interesting that even the natives wouldn't even come close to some of these areas and said, "Why don't you live by the coast?" No, because the tsunamis come in and flood the areas, or it sinks, or they have sand blows, it's like, no. And so
like there's a reason why they were nomadic.
Yeah. They stayed interiorly, yes, up in the highlands almost. Anyway, kind of a little bit off subject in a sense, but there's this young man, and it was shortly after the 1906 earthquake and another subsequent earthquake that rocked him, where he was riding a horse. He fell off his horse and banged his head. Went to the hospital. And had a series of events that happened to him. And we'll call them dreams, we'll call them visions or whatever. But he articulates an upcoming event that takes place that hasn't happened yet, but that suggests exactly what we're talking about. And some of you would say, "Oh, that's just, mumbo jumbo." But the kid said certain things that he can't possibly ever know. It didn't exist. And the kid said, with quite incredible detail, from northern part of South America all the way up through Central America, all the way up through Mexico, all the way up through Southern Cal, Central Cal, Northern Cal, and the Cascades. And he talked about how the whole world was affected by this event, a series of earthquakes that took place. That for some, they'll say, oh yeah, it's going to happen. And for others, like, whatever. But the possibility is there because what we've been showing you is quite, and this kid didn't know it. He was a young kid in the teens, young, before 21. In 1937, he had this event that took place over a series of couple of days. He didn't want to do this. He just, every time he went to sleep, these things happened. And he articulated these things in such a way that he spoke about major highways that we see today. He spoke about helicopters that didn't exist back then. He spoke about volcanic activity that took place, that we've seen evidence that when this volcano goes off, something else happens there. It's like, wait a minute. You know, you can't just throw out his visions. It's like, what the heck? So the dream is Joe Brandt's California earthquake dream of 1937. You can find it on YouTube. For those of you that would like to see kind of what the entire evidence is showing of what we've been talking about and the devastating calamities that take place in these visions, that if you extrapolate out of that and just look at it, you know, critically and say, well, if this happens here, wow, this could happen. And I encourage you, Joe Brandt's 1937 vision, where the guy talks about it. And I think the guy who's talking about it is in the 1960s. He hears about it, and he goes back and tries to find the actual written record of these visions. And for those on JSL, we've played it several times. Why? Because you know, we do that kind of thing. But do yourself a favor. Try just going to sit back and listen to what he's saying. Don't get caught up in the hoopla. Just listen to what he's saying. And then take the evidence that we've been showing you. Yeah, there's a couple missing holes, and we're going to fill in the holes the next time around. So I want to encourage you. Joe Brandt, 1937. That's what we're going to start off with next week. All right? Big hugs to you all. And remember, don't get none on you. Say goodnight there, Canuck.
Good night, everybody.
Peace out, baby. Remember, tomorrow's Steak Friday.